Because of the chaotic atmosphere, the Prime Minister, Alhaji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, declared a state of emergency in the West on May 29, 1962, before an emergency session of the Federal Parliament. Obafemi Awolowo, leader of the opposition, replied that a state of emergency did not exist in the Western region, as the violence was only confined to the Regional House of Assembly, while the rest of the West was calm and quiet. When Major Kaduna Nzelgu and his colleagues struck on the morning of January 15, 1966, to end Nigeria's First Republic, one of their grievances was a political unrest in the western region of Nigeria. There were riots, looting, arson, and murder. Political opponents were burned alive. The event came to be known as Operation Wetie, and the western region was nicknamed Wild Wild West.
That the NPN has acceded to power by fouling the electoral process. We have seen that in fouling the process, the NPN was not alone. Indeed, by itself alone, there was very little the NPN could do which would have made any noticeable impact. But the FEDECO and practically all the organs of government were involved in the foul game. It stands to reason that having fouled the game once to advantage and with impunity, the NPN will want to try it again to perpetuate itself in office as its national end, to tamper, let alone foul the electoral process to the prejudice of other contending parties. It is imperative that we should tackle and involve solutions for and widespread rigging of election in 1965 are today among those who are equally prominent in the leadership of the NPN.
Knowingly or unknowingly, Colonel Ojukwu essentially confirmed all rumors with a series of rousing criticisms of the Gowon administration's failure to provide adequate protection to the thousands of Igbos who were being attacked and killed by people they imagined were their fellow citizens. With tensions at an all-time high, General Yakubu Gowon and other key members of the government agreed to meet with Colonel Ojukwu at a neutral location so that both sides could try to de-escalate the situation. This two-day meeting will take place in the Ghanaian town of Aburi from the 4th to the 5th of January 1967. Although many still debate what exactly was agreed at this meeting, General Ojukwu left Aburi fully convinced that Gowon had accepted all of the Eastern region's demands. This controversial agreement, known today as the Aburi Accord, was not honored by the Gowon administration. Upon returning to Nigeria, General Yakubu Gowon decided instead to break Nigeria's regions into smaller states and turn Nigeria into an American-style federation composed of 12 states. Except unlike in the American system, each state had very little autonomy and very little control over its own resources.
If civil war comes, and I do think it is imminent, you're quite right, it will for us be the price of freedom. Our people here have for a long time been prepared for this eventuality, and I am confident of their readiness. I think that when it does come, the people on the other side would be surprised as to what they're going to get. And I'm confident that it will not last long.
50 years ago today, the war in which Biafra tried to secede from the rest of Nigeria ended. It was one of Africa's bloodiest post-independence conflicts, in which over 1 million people died through famine, disease, and of course fighting. To find out what that war has meant for Africa's most populous country, I've been speaking to two Nigerians. Timothy Modu was a child during the Biafran War. His father, Timothy C. Modu, was the international negotiator for the government of Biafra from 1967 to 1970. I've also been hearing from the historian and lawyer Dele Ogun, but Timothy Modu first. What are his memories of the conflict?
We were living in a town called Owerri in the eastern Nigeria. As a child, one vivid memory for me to know what the war was like was one day in the morning as a child, everywhere was like helter-skelter, children running around, and there were trenches. And my older sister, who was to look after me, and I was really, really young, I was crying, there was rain pouring, and people were running into ditches. And I find myself standing, as if everybody had disappeared, and only me standing in the middle of a whole open space. And as I speak to you now, it comes back to memory, never leaves me. And that experience, I cried all day long. I don't know how I managed to sort of being taken care of, but it was a memory that stays for me in my life forever. It's very frightening, and basically what was going on was a fighter was just simply shooting randomly, and the school just disappeared, everybody running for their lives. And it's just shivering in experience. So my parents have to now lift all of us back to the village, and then to now make sure that we got to a place where the war has not yet come.
I want to bring Dele Ogun in now, a historian. For you, as you look back, what was the hope that a separate Biafra represented?
It has to be understood it was a defensive move by the Igbos. They were victims of a series of pogroms that took place in 1966, in which huge numbers, tens of thousands, were slaughtered. And so it was a retreat to the eastern enclave. And Nigeria at that point was arranged on a tripod basis with 3 regions. And you had your eastern region where the Igbos were predominant, you had the western region where the Yorubas were predominant, and then you had the northern region where the Hausa Fulani were predominant. And the seeds of the conflict were sown in those arrangements for independence. A coup happened on January 15th, which dismantled the tripod federal balanced arrangement and substituted a unitary government. That coup was blamed on the Igbos unfairly, I say. The evidence that's clearly now come to light shows.
And you say that as the Yoruba yourself?
Yes, unfairly blamed on them. So they were scapegoated. They were effectively then sacrificed in this war in the name of political union in order to keep Nigeria together. And so that's why the narrative has always been about how horrible that war was. And it was made, I say, deliberately horrific in order to warn anybody else from ever attempting to secede again. But it hasn't worked. We're back full circle.
I'd like to ask both of you actually where you stand on this idea that the obsession to prevent another secession and keep the country together actually ended up creating a fixation on sharing opportunities between the different regions, and then created a kind of solidified the ethnicities in Nigeria.
That's precisely what has happened. In a desperate quest for political union, one Nigeria as it was known, such that we were refusing, and the government was refusing to face the reality of difference and manage that difference sensibly, and rather running with a false narrative of one people. It has produced a situation where the competition for that one seat became all-consuming, and that's become the national obsession.
It's almost like a situation where you have United Kingdom, you have Scottish, you have the Welsh, and then you have the Northern Ireland, and you have England. That was actually, if you like, before the independence. The whole regional arrangement was actually based on that model. And when you move that sort of regional balance, and for people to actually focus on what their strengths are, and then you begin to now have one concentrated area, and then you bring the curse, the oil, to Nigeria, then there was no incentive anymore for people to actually try and promote and develop the economic welfare. And like Dele said, the power now concentrates on one center, and at the center, and then that center focuses its energy to a natural resource called oil.
And I suppose you can't look back at the Biafran War without looking back at Britain's role as the colonial power and as the force which helped to arm the rest of Nigeria against Biafra. And of course for the constitution as well, and its part in that. How is Britain seen when Nigerians remember the Biafran War?
Going back to me as a Biafran child, it took me nearly 40 odd years to even tell any non-Igbo that is in Nigeria my experience of Biafra. I have to keep it to maintain relationship. What it means is that I cannot, as a Biafran child in Nigeria, talk about my Biafran experience. It's just not allowed. So it's only last 10 years that what you call agitation is more or less have liberated all of us. That I can come here not feeling that, I'll be gagged up in Nigeria or something like that, and actually talk about my experience. And people just don't understand the liberation of it. So coming back to the British role, that for us, from a Biafran point of view, I reflect back and I'm saying, Britain, you knew better. You could probably have helped. If nothing else, for some of us who, like what we're doing now, what was the experience? It's liberating in its first place. And that, for me, we are from the Igbo side, I would say, I could have expected more from Britain.
And Dele, you?
Yes, speaking as on behalf of the Yoruba side, we are almost at the point of cursing the British colonial government. Not the British people, but the British colonial government. Yeah. And after that, the Wilson administration. Harold Wilson. Our northern counterparts at the political level will be thanking Britain because they were the ones who were advantaged by the arrangements that were put in place for decolonization. So rather than Britain leaving us a balanced federation where, as I say, harmony was the premium, we were left with an arrangement which promoted winner-takes-all and domination.
That was historian Dele Ogun, and we also heard from Timothy Modu, who lived through the war. From me and the rest of the team here on NewsHour, thanks very much for listening.